Hello. Um, More Digimon allies. So, this one is going to be a video about the Monster Makers slash, well, they're also called the Wild Bunch at times, is also one of the other nicknames they give them in the series. So this video is going to be talking about the people within the Digimon Tamers universe that are kind of responsible for the Digimon, the digital world itself existing in Digimon Tamers. I do plan for the next video, that'll be the next Digimon video after this one, to be about how the digital world itself was made, and then I'll go back to talking about like the different characters and such. But I figured that this one is a companion piece to that one. Those two going together would be a good way of doing that. Um, so uh, this one, and also one of the reasons I waited a little bit instead of doing this one directly right after I did like the hypno stuff is because this also involves a good chunk about Henry's dad and about Alice's grandfather. So I wanted to get some of those videos done too, where I have like the whole Wong family video where I talk so much more about Henry's father in that. I'll also talk more about him in this one as well. But you know, those two kind of go together. And then, of course, Alice, later on, who is the Digi-Destin, or the tamer that ends up having Doberman, that one, she is the granddaughter of one of the other monster makers. So, both of them are implied in this. And then, of course, the monster makers themselves are rather integral to the series. In regards to they are the ones that are responsible for the digital world, for all intents and purposes, existing, or the origin point for the Digimon. And then they are also important in regards to helping make the arc that bring the children home, and in regards to developing and implementing the different programs that are used to then take down the D Reaper by the end of the series. So that's kind of what this one's going to go over. Kind of the basic summary that they have is that the Monster Makers, or the Wild Bunch, is this informal international group of programmers who had attended college together in the mid 80s. For reference, Digimon Tamers, I've mentioned, takes place in about the 2000s range. You know, that time frame. I think all of the episodes finished airing, or like were airing in 2001 into 2002, if I remember correctly. So it takes place within that time frame. Is the way that it's set. And it was supposed to be that all of these different people, including Henry's father and a bunch of the other ones, all went to college together. It's hinted that they all went to college in America, and that's how they all know each other and stuff like that. Like, you know, international students, you know, study in lots of different places and stuff like that. One of my cousins met his wife because she was over here from Japan studying. In Oklahoma, and she went to college in Oklahoma, and that's where they met, and you know, now they're married and they have 2 kids, and currently they're living in Japan because of his job is actually taking them over to Japan. So I went to figure out a time when I can actually go to Japan, and you know, I have family there, so it's just like, well, I'm going to go see my family. Also, I'm going to go and just have a whole lot of fun in Japan. I hope that that's further away on the horizon than I would like at the moment. And they talk about this in the series. We have stuff where like Henry's father, Jean Yu, along with a couple of the others, end up talking about like how they ended up making the Digimon. And I'll go into a little bit more into that one, but it's generally they were the ones that made this program that was the origin of where the Digimon came from. And in regards to that, it was, you know, they made these simple, rudimentary, different digital beings, and then they kind of evolved, and then essentially they were forced to shut down the program, either because it was time for them to all graduate, or the funding was gone and they had to shut it down. And then eventually, those little programs that they made ended up by via 2 different ways. You know, it evolves into what became the Digimon in the digital world itself, but via, you know, the internet and technology and everything like that evolving. But then also those Digimon, those original programs that they used later on, ended up being used by this other company and turned them into, you know, the digital video games and the card games that the kids play. Again, I'll delve more into that a little bit later into the video, and then a lot more into that setup when I do about the origins of the digital world for Digimon Tamers. So, into the members of the monster makers. So the main member that we spend the most amount of time with is Jianyu Tao Wong. He is, of course, Henry's father. He's, the father of Henry's, other siblings and stuff like that. And via the math I did, he's roughly probably in his 40s. There's a couple of these characters we get the ages on, not all of them, but a couple of them. Henry's father is not one of the ones we get the ages on, but I kind of like, well, process of elimination means he's from his, mid 40s to late 40s. At the oldest, he's 50. But he doesn't strike me as that old. And Tao is just one of his nickname in the series that like the other monster makers, all the different monster makers have like nicknames that they gave each other based on either like where they're from or a hobby or just some other random nickname that they have. So that's just kind of how it's like, kind of like their hacker handle or something like that. Because I'm sure several of these people are probably very good at hacking computers and stuff like that. But I went a fair amount into Mr. Wong, into Henry's father's past and his part in the story in the Digimon, in the video where I talked about the Wong family. So if you want a lot more of that, you can go there. Some of it will get touched on here. The other member that was kind of one of the key members that we see throughout the series, although we don't know that it's him, is this character that is referred to as Shibumi. His full name is, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, I apologize, Goro Shibumi Mizuno. And he, again, just one of these other people that was, at, part of the Digimon project and everything. It's kind of hinted, we get a little bit that it was more shut down in 1986 as one of the other just moments that we get in the series that it's mentioned there. He's another member of the monster makers and stuff like that. For the record, Shibumi, as his nickname, is the plural of Shibui, which is Japanese for effortless perfection. And it's this title of a book by, I'm going to mispronounce this again, I apologize, Travadian. And it's just, Shibumi was always this perfectionist when it came to the project for the Digimon and everything like that. And even after the Digimon project got shut down, after their college and everything like that, when it got shut down, he was kind of the one that kept continuously going after this stuff, seeing what was going on with it and everything, because he's like, well, these things can't be gone yet. We saw that they developed some form of consciousness, so they can't just be gone. Or by technicality, they kind of committed mass word I'm not saying on YouTube. But Shibumi was this very much, wanted to see what happened, wanted to keep everything going. Eventually, we do end up seeing him later on in the series, and he ends up being kind of one of the origins for these things that are called the blue cards, which when I go into, that'll be part of a, description that I'll do for like the Digimon for how they digivolve, but also I am going to do a video where I talk about all the different cards to a degree, that all the different, the different modify cards and stuff like that the Tamers use throughout the course of the series. I do plan on doing a video about that at some point. But he kind of ends up making these cards that are called the blue cards. They become blue cards. They're part of a code that allows a Digimon that when used by their used by their tamer as a modify card, allows them to digivolve. And like, we just see him randomly as like this guy walking around in like a yellow jacket and in a low fitting ball cap and everything like that. And then at one point we see him get chased by the people that are working for Hypnos and stuff like that, like all the black suits that are working for Hypnos. They chase him around. And then the big introduction that we get to him is that when all the Tamers head off to the digital world is when Takato and Henry and Terriermon are separated from the rest of the group. Takato, Henry, and Terriermon end up finding their way into this kind of underwater area, and they end up in like this kind of underwater version of like a library combined with like a lecture hall. And they end up there, and this is where they meet Shibumi. And he's just like, he looks kind of like a ghost because like he's kind of transparent, as opposed to Henry and Takato that are like physically able to interact with the digital world. Shibumi doesn't seem quite able to do that at the time. He could still like somewhat interact with it, and there are all of these diginomes around them. Again, diginomes will get brought into other stuff when it comes to the origin of the digital world. But all of the diginomes are around, a bunch of the diginomes are around him, and he gives Henry and Takato this very in-depth, well, kind of in-depth, very basic explanation as to what's going on and stuff like that. And Shibumi is very philosophical as well. He goes into this whole thing that um oh, you guys are just an illusion in my mind. And like we find out that actually in the real world, Shibumi, his actual body, is basically being I would say he's in a comatose state. That appears to be what it is, but he's also literally like hooked his brain up to the internet, the digital world, whatever you want to call it. He's hooked his brain up to that, and he's has all these different things monitoring him while he's doing this, to just monitor his brain activity and everything like that, to kind of, I guess, record, I guess, the best that it can to see what's going on. And this is the closest he got to actually being able to go to the digital world. He can somewhat interact with it, but he can't quite touch stuff as much as he would like. He gives Takato and Henry a decent explanation as to, how different, how the Digimon evolved to a degree. And later on, once the Tamers have kind of, worked things out a little bit with the Digimon Sovereign and they've learned about the D-Reaper, Shibumi shows up there, and he gives another explanation to the Sovereign and to the Tamers and stuff like that, and explains that, so yes, the original data, the original programs that we made that were designed to become the Digimon that ended up becoming the Digimon later on, these designs were not meant to go beyond the limited capacity that we gave them, but clearly they did. They developed into the Digimon in the digital world and the D-Reaper, and like just this continuous evolving, and eventually that became Digivolution and stuff like that. That the Digimon continuously evolve and digivolve as they got stronger and stronger and more complex and everything, and built up kind of their own societies and stuff like that within the digital world, their own cultures and everything else. And Shibumi is trying to give them some more information about this, but unfortunately he ends up being woken up at this point in time. And it's revealed that he's actually been in this hospital bed at various points in time for over a decade, as he's been trying to get into the digital world and find out some more of this information and see what's going on with the digital world. So that's where I get a little iffy about whether or not he's actually the man in the baseball cap, because I'm like, but that would have been the time frame that he was in the coma, so I don't know. So I just find that very interesting. But like he wakes up from that and everything. And then of course, throughout the rest of the series, eventually he is reunited with the rest of the Monster Makers, who up till that point in time have now been working with Hypnos, which I'll get into. I went over that a bit more with John Yu, but Shibumi ends up rejoining the group, and of course they're all very happy to see him and everything. And then he helps with them getting the arc ready, and with getting Grani turned, well, not getting the arc ready, but getting the arc turned into Grani. Grani's gonna get his own video. I love Grani. He's great. He's a ship that got turned into a Digimon, basically, and I love it. But he helps with getting that done, and he ends up making this red card as opposed to the blue card. The red card is what allows the Tamers to be able to fight within the D-Reaper without having this backlash of like them being forcefully separated from their Digimon, because they found out earlier on that if the Tamers enter the D-Reaper is designed to eliminate things, and it has a harder time assimilating organic life, but it can do it. It can delete organic life. But when Takato and Gilmon as Gallantmon had ended up in the D-Reaper, they ended up having to de-biomerge to protect themselves, because they couldn't hold the form, and they need to be able to hold that form in order for them to be able to fight in the D-Reaper. And that's why Shibumi designs the red card. And this allows them to be able to fight in the D-Reaper, as I said. Unfortunately, they end up getting the timing off and stuff like that for how long it's supposed to last, and it does result in that results in them, Takato and Rika and Henry and Ryu all like de-biomerging while they're still within the D-Reaper. I mean, it's finished off and they've beaten it and they've saved Jerry, but it like stops, like de-biomerges them before they're able to fully finish everything and get out safe. But thankfully, Kazu and Kenta and well, not Suzy, but Kazu, Kenta, and Lopmon and their Digimon show up to save them. So Shibumi is very much in regards to being he helps a lot with the programming and everything like that. He's kind of one of these very natural geniuses and stuff like that. So there's a few things that happen with that. And he's, as I said, he's kind of one of the sources of the blue cards at various points in time. The next member that we have of the monster makers that we're introduced to a degree, because we meet Janyu first, and we kind of meet Shibumi a little bit in the background, and then when Janyu is brought on by Yamaki to work at Hypnos and stuff like that, he then reveals that, hey, we've got the rest of your friends here. We have all the other monster makers, and that results in that reunion. And then we end up getting to meet all of them. One of the ones that we meet is Rob Dolphin McCoy. He is the grandfather of Alice McCoy, who we saw later, toward the end of the series. She's the one with Doberman, as I said. She is the daughter of his son. I want to say Hank, but don't quote me on that because I don't remember. But it's she's his granddaughter. And he is Dolphin. I'm just going to refer to him as Dolphin because that's generally what everybody refers to him as, because that's his nickname. The side of that has happened is that like he had been studying under this professor that was studying dolphins, so that's why that's his nickname, is Dolphin. He is a professor at Palo Alto, California. As I said, same with the others. He's part of this project, the Monster Makers project and stuff like that kind of began in 1984. So it kind of ran from 1984 to 1986 range is kind of when it was supposedly happening. While they were all in college and stuff like that and studying abroad in America, and how all of that develops and everything, and eventually that results in the digital world being able to grow and flourish, where that goes into. Roughly 20 years later, Dolphin and the rest of the monster makers are all brought back together by Yamaki and Hypnos to be able to help them figure out how to stop the Digimon. So they can technically, at that time, Yamaki is still on his quest of destroy the Digimon because they are a threat, they are a problem, they're a pest is how he still views them at that point in time. To a degree, through interacting with the monster makers and, through, Takato and his friends and stuff like that. That is, of course, as I said with Yamaki's video, it kind of makes him change. But he brings on, Janyu and the rest of the monster makers. And he gives them an explanation as to, so these creatures that you originally made, these programs, have now evolved into, he shows them the footage of Vicaramon, the giant boar deva. And they see that, and they're able to see, oh yeah, no, that's not good. That's not good for the amount of damage that it's been able to cause. That's something that they designed, this little innocuous thing, this little program that they made that was just for fun, or a project or whatever, has now evolved into its own versions of life. And Yamaki, tries to convince them to, convince the monster makers to help him try to destroy them. I don't think the monster makers are all that keen on wanting to destroy these things that came from their own creation, because Dolphin later on I don't know if he ever actually finds out that his granddaughter was the one with Doberman, because the other tamers never learned her. Well, no, they hear Doberman call her Alice, but I don't know if they know that was his granddaughter or whatever. But Dolphin, along with the others, of course, help with trying to find ways to stabilize stuff so that they can maybe shut down the walls between the digital world and the real world to prevent the Digimon from coming through. Dolphin is also there when they're trying to make the Ark, and when they're trying to, get these different codes and programs ready and everything like that. Dolphin is also Dolphin, and another one that we'll find out later that I believe is called Curly. They are, yeah, Curly, I think. Dolphin, one of the other ones, actually end up making television appearances because, of course, after the Tamers return from the digital world, there is, the D Reaper follows them, and the D Reaper starts appearing at various places around the world. It starts appearing in Japan and so many other different places. And Dolphin, along with a couple of the other ones, go on television at that point in time and actually are part of like this news broadcast and interviews and stuff like that help explain what the D Reaper is, and basically go on and tell the world, yes, Digimon are real. This thing is coming from where the Digimon came from. Yeah, the giant boar pig thing that appeared in Japan a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, it's real too. That wasn't a stunt. It was real. It wasn't a terrorist attack or whatever. All this other stuff. And like, they basically tell the world, yes, Digimon are real. And this thing is trying to destroy them and us, and we're technically the ones that made it. So yeah, they did this whole big, television interview thing that they do. That I like that they showed that in the series, because in the first two seasons of Digimon, with the two Digimon Adventure seasons, later on in the movies later on, they got a lot more like how the news would be covering this stuff at that point in time. Like, they went over that in the last Digivolution and in the Digimon Adventure Try stuff, where they have like news stories and stuff like that about the Digimon. So in this case, it's a lot more of like, we saw the military's reaction to the Digimon and stuff like that, with them trying to take out several different Digimon at that point in time, including Vicarimon, and the military trying to deal with the D Reaper, which I'll touch on that in a little bit again. I haven't decided. I kind of want to do a video that's about like how the military had reacted to the D Reaper and to the Devas and stuff like that when they were showing up, and the other Digimon. Haven't quite made that decision yet, the military and the media in that regard. But I like that they bring that in as an element in the show to give it a little bit more of a realistic feel. Because yeah, I mean, here in the US, Digimon was much more aimed at like kids and stuff like that, like the same age range necessarily that like Pokemon was aimed at. I can see some of the, I can see the similarities there, of course. But that was what they tried to aim it at. But they also talk of, other things in the series, like what's going on with the Devas and, when they're attacking, and the D Reaper and everything like that, that's a little bit, heavier handed than what, like, with Pokemon necessarily. Not that Pokemon doesn't have heavy-handed subjects and stuff like that in it, and particularly in some of the movies as well, but still. But, Dolphin and his group are, in the, Monster Makers help with developing that stuff, and of course, the red cards and making Grani and getting, Juggernaut and Doodlebug and everything else ready to, send off to help the Digimon Tamers and everything like that with taking down, the D Reaper. Next up, we have two of the women that are part of the Monster Makers. We have, gonna mispronounce this and I apologize, Aishwari Curly Rai. Again, I apologize, mispronouncing. Sorry. She is from India, and she is a professor at the Meconomic University. Again, I'm sorry, don't ask. She focuses on quantum theory, is which her stuff is focused on. She's named after, I believe, an Indian actress and model is who she's named after. And yeah, her alias is Curly, probably a joke on either her hair is so straight that it never curls, or it like gets curly if it's humid out or something like that. As I said, most of the nicknames that the different Monster Makers have for each other tend to be just like a reference to like, oh, something funny that has to do with that person, and that's what they go with. So she's Curly. She's about 43. We actually get an age on her. I did not say this before, but Dolphin is 50. I think he stated to be 50 in supplemental material. But yes, again, Curly, she's from India. She was part of the Monster Makers group and everything, and in the 80s and everything. And of course, they all went their separate ways, and of course, they're all brought back together, of course, by Yamaki and everything. And he wants to, he wants to have them, of course, help destroy the Digimon, as I said. Curly, again, just fits into the other stuff she's there with, having to deal with parts of dealing with the different programs and developing the arc and developing, the red card for, getting them where they need to, for helping fight the D-Reaper and for, figuring out other things that they can do. She's one of the other ones that is very much interviewed by the press when stuff is going on. So I like that they're doing that. That they have some of that stuff happen there. She's a big part of that. I think she mentioned she has a family, but we don't ever get anything additional about that. So there's not too much there. And then we have the last kind of two members, full-on members, and then like an acquaintance. So the next one that we have up is Babel. We never learn his real name. He is an African-American who specializes in theoretical physics. And to the data that I found, he's 36 years old, which means he would have been quite young when they were at, when they were in college and stuff like that. He would have been very, quite young, like probably like younger than 18 at the college at the time. So again, very smart person. And then the other one that we have is Daisy. Again, real name is never known. Reference to the film. Her name is a reference to the movie, 2001: A Space Odyssey. I don't know. I've never seen 2001: A Space Odyssey. At some point in time, I probably should watch it. I just haven't yet. Just something maybe. Lots of classic movies I need to watch at some point in time. That one's kind of on the list. Is there a character in it that I don't know? But Daisy specializes in robotics and software, and she is one of the main ones that ends up helping build Grani, or ends up building the arc that then is turned into Grani. She's one of the main ones that deals with that. Again, she does mention that she has family somewhere. Again, don't ever get any additional information about that. Same thing with Babel. I don't know if we ever get where Babel's nickname from. I think it's a reference to the Tower of Babel, isn't like from Judeo-Christian mythology, the Tower of Babel and stuff like that, but I don't know anything else that. Also like techno-babble, technological babble and everything like that goes into that stuff. Other people that watch the channel know that I love One Piece. All of these people that are part of the Monster Makers, I think Vegapunk, for anybody that pays attention to One Piece and know who Vegapunk is, they would have a field day with him. Like, all of them working together would just have a field day. Yeah, that would be true. That popped into my head. I'm like, yep, they get along. They'd have a fun time. And then the last one that I did want to point out is Johnny Beckenstein. He is an American ally of the Monster Maker. So it's hinted that he probably knew them in college or something like that. Like, he was at college at the same time as them. And he is very smart in and of himself. He is a member of the he's connected to the American military, and stuff like that, because parts of the American military are part of the offense against the D-Reapers and stuff like that. And I think that it is Johnny's, so the way that they introduce him is he's just literally they're communicating with, the Monster Makers are communicating with each other, and then they get a call from the American side of things, because of course there's people in America, because there's something of the D-Reaper has appeared in America as well, and they're trying to deal with it there, and because it's appeared all over the world, and they're trying to deal with it there, and they're dealing with the Monster Makers and Hypnos are dealing with it in Japan and everything. And Johnny calls him and Johnny, and they all recognize him and everything. And he explains that he's kind of working on the American side of things, and that he's also that one of the things that they dropped a whole bunch of stuff into sections of the D-Reaper. Now, the monster makers and the audience assume that these are supposed to be bombs or something like that, like missiles or something like that, that they dropped into the D Reaper to explode to try to, destroy it. That's not what they sent in. They sent in these stealth bombs. They use stealth bombers to drop this stuff, but they dropped in these different they look like little missiles or little injectors and stuff like that. And they drop them into the D Reaper, and they're designed with cameras inside of them to be able to get pictures of what's going on within the D Reaper. And this is where they get a whole bunch of data and stuff like that they're able to use to help make the red card. And I don't remember if that helps with making Grani or not, but they use it to help figure out how to fight the D Reaper better. So they're, Johnny's able to give them a lot of that information that the American side has received on things. So it's lots of international coordination and stuff going on with this. So we have that and stuff. So they get some handfuls of information from these probes. And that's actually quite helpful. Plus, we get a lot of images of what's going on inside the D Reaper at that point in time. Also, versions of using technology that does not involve blowing everything up. So a little bit more history for what happens with the monster makers. As I said, it starts in the 1980s. 1984 is generally, from what I've seen, where they tend to place it on the timeline. They are all attending a college. We never know which one. And they, they all meet. They're all just friends, and they're all programmers in their different fields and stuff like that. Like, as I said, we got physicists in here. We got, just different stuff in general. We got one of them that was studying dolphins. We got one of them, John, who was a programmer. We've got robotics. We've got all this stuff that goes, that you can see how some of the stuff would work together, but it's all these ones coming together, and they're all really good programmers. And they had a motto. It's in Latin, and I'm going to mispronounce it, and I apologize. It's Focio Vita. Sorry. Translates to digging life. So I'm assuming that's supposed to be a reference to digging life out of this code, and digging life out of what we can do and stuff like that. As in actual life, not oh, I can make a life out of this. It's like growing life. And they start developing these artificial life forms that became known as Digimon, and the basics for what ended up becoming the digital world. Unfortunately, at some point in time, in about 1986, it's hinted that the program was shut down by the university because either they didn't like or didn't agree with what they were doing, or just funding was gone and there's no point in funding this project anymore. And that goes away, and they developed it for about 2 years at that point in time and stuff like that. And as I said, Shibumi is the most reluctant to give this up, and he ends up going off and becoming this recluse and everything like that. Far more than he was, apparently. And eventually, all of the Digimon, the basics for the Digimon in the digital world is what evolves into the digital world itself, and, combining with technology as it advances and everything like that, because as is similar to what happened in Digimon Adventures, as human technology advances, so does the Digimon technology, so does the digital world, because they are connected. And the same thing happens in Tamers, where it's these bases for the Digimon grew based on all the different other scientific and technological advances and stuff like that that humans made from the 80s into the early 2000s, when Digimon Tamers takes place. And had they, ever continued the series, I would love it if we got a digital Tamers material beyond the 2 movies that we got that don't really add too much into it, in regards to advancing the story further, several years or whatever. I would love it if we got an additional video or another series or a movie or whatever that had more of that stuff with the Tamers children, but I don't see that happening. Wish it did. Doesn't seem like it. But as I said, Shibumi eventually goes into the digital world, via his, partially comatose state and everything like that, and interacts with that stuff. And then, of course, he's, kind of the, not the developer. Well, he somewhat is part of the developing these bridges that form into the Digivices, and the blue cards and stuff like that, some of the programming that results in that. And then, of course, later on in the 2000s, that's when, of course, Yamaki brings in, Jianyu and the rest of the monster makers and stuff like that, and brings them in and explains to them. So this is what happened with the Digimon. They grew, and now they're able to do all this stuff. They emerge through these different digital fields and stuff like that. And yes, they can cause damage to humans, and that's why he wants to get rid of them. And so that's a lot of what happens there. And then, of course, they are somewhat okay with trying to help figure out ways to, like, not, like, destroy the Digimon, but, like, stop them from coming in. And, during this time frame, Jianyu ends up finding out later on that Henry is a tamer, that Henry has Terriermon, and that Terriermon has been this Digimon living in his house for the past however many months, or however long Henry's had Terriermon. We never get an exact answer on that, but, like, that Terriermon is there. And, he sees his son interact with the Digimon and a bunch of this other stuff, and sees his son and his friends interact with them. And that's kind of what, makes Jianyu not want to get rid of them, because he sees that not all Digimon are bad. And, the rest of them end up seeing what happens with Vicarimon and everything, and a whole bunch of other stuff is what we see here. And, of course, the kids head off to the digital world, and, of course, as I mentioned, the different, the programmers, the monster makers are the ones that develop the ARC that they then send to the digital world. Also, during the time frame that they are dealing with the ARC, they end up having to basically send out, like, this mass message to people all over the world. Motorcycle. This mass message to people all over the world that, to a degree, sounds like an internet scam, but they help. And that it's basically like, hey, there's a bunch of these kids that are trapped. We need the computing power of your computer to be able to help with this. And via the internet and all this other stuff, and, like, these connecting of computers, they're able to then use that to make basically this giant supercomputer out of all of them that is able to, use all these other computers to do smaller calculations and then add them all together to give them the big full calculation that they need to be able to locate not only how to get from the real world to the digital world, but also to materialize the ARC within the digital world, and then find where the Tamers entered the digital world and where they first landed there, because that's where they have to meet again, and then keep it stable there for the time frame so that way they can all get on the ARC, and then to get them out. And I love how they show that, because it's just like, it's not like with the original series where it's just like, hey, there's a portal. Let's go through the portal. We're in the digital world. Now what? It's not that easy. This one, they make it a lot harder, and I kind of like how they do that it's a lot more of this dangerous thing that can happen for how you go from the digital world to the real world. It's a much less streamlined thing, and I like that they pull that off. One of the people that helps with this is Rika's grandmother. She helps with some of that, and then, of course, they design the ARC, bring the kids back and everything, and are there when they're reunited with their families. And, it's for them, there's two sides of this. It's like, A, they want to bring these kids back because they went to go and save their friend and save Calamon, and they come back. But it's like, their friend's son is one of these children, is one of the children that's in the digital world. Jianyu's son, Henry, is one of these kids. And they end up meeting the parents of the other Tamers that are there that, got sent off to the digital world, or that willingly went to the digital world, I should say. They meet the other Tamers' parents and everything like that, like Takado's parents and Rika's parents and, all of them. And, like, they promise that they'll do everything they can to bring the kids back, because that's what they want to do. That is their job. And I love how they do that. One of the other things is, of course, after they all get taken out of the after all the kids are back and everything, that, of course, they have to set up, the D Reaper follows them, and they have to set up the temporary headquarters in one of these other buildings. At one point, they're also in a van. I don't remember. But, like, they end up in, this temporary headquarters in a different building. And then, of course, they start developing what they can do to get Grani. And I think it's actually, like, Yamaki and Daisy that kind of come up with this to, like, bring Grani back into the real world, and, turn the ARC into Grani. And I love how they did that, and they're the ones that designed it. And, Tally and Riley are helping with a bunch of this stuff as well. And, like, they're all using the Hypnos computers to help with a lot of this stuff. So I love how they do that. And I'm going to point this out. The D Reaper the very base program for the D-Reaper was also something that the monster makers designed. So it's also like, well, we designed this program and now it's gone out of control. And now we have to find a way to stop it or else it's going to destroy our world. So how are we going to do that? And that's where they come up with, they use Doodlebug and Juggernaut and whatever else in order to be able to, stop the D-Reaper. Shibumi shows back up again. They make the blue, they make the red cards. They find out, of course, that Jerry and Beelzemon are being held within the D-Reaper and that they have to then try to save them. And, of course, one of the big choices of the series ends up being put on, on Henry's dad, on John New, that he has to make this decision to put the Juggernaut program inside of Terriermon. And, that's that sacrifice, that choice that he made is what results in, of course, the Digimon having to go back to the digital world, because at the moment they can't survive in the real world anymore because they've kind of been somewhat infected by the Juggernaut virus, so they have to go back, so that way, I'm assuming, so they can be cleansed. And, John Yu and the rest of them knew what they were doing when they made that decision. And it is kind of the for the greater good, and, he makes that same argument to Henry, and this is, in the last episode when he's, on his knees and, like, apologizing to Henry and Susie and the others, and, like, someday you'll understand, please forgive me, I'm so sorry, type of a thing. And, Henry, we never get an answer as to whether or not Henry fully forgives his father for what happened, for that choice that he made, without consulting Henry or the rest of the kids, because it is partially their choice as well, and the fact that this would result in them being separated from their Digimon for an indeterminate amount of time. I mean, given, the last episode of the series, also at the end of it, we see that, there's this portal, so it's implied that the Tamers are able to go back and either get the Digimon or that the Digimon are able to return. And then, of course, we have the Runaway Locomon movie that, of course, takes place after the series. And that, of course, ends up showing that, yes, the Digimon are able to come back and the Tamers can still biomerge with them and all this other stuff. So it's like, it's not like it's completely gone, but we never get that resolution as to if, like, Henry ever fully forgives his father for that decision. And we never actually get the resolution as to whether or not Dolphin finds out that his granddaughter was, that Alice was, was the one with Doberman. I don't know if we ever end up getting that information. I think it's implied that he finds out somehow, but I don't know. It's never 100% explained as far as I'm aware, and I looked for additional stuff if they mentioned it, but I couldn't find anything. So, that's a lot of stuff that happens there. That's basically what I have for the Monster Makers. As I said, I am going to do another video where I talk about kind of like how the digital world within the Digimon Tamers world developed and kind of how it works. And part of that, as I said, does tie into the Monster Makers, obviously, because they are kind of like the origins for, like, the seeds for the digital world and stuff like that, for the base program that became the digital world and the Digimon. So I figured that this one was a good base starting point, and then I can go from there. So that'll probably end up going up the week after this one goes up. So I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned some stuff about the Monster Makers if you didn't know it, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.